Hello again everyone. Gemma 2, or Gemma Frostbitten Heart, has been since its birth last season one of the top tier characters to play in Torchlight Infinite. The combination of a very solid offensive traits and an unusual defense due to the ability to freeze everything in sight makes for a very well-rounded character that can easily jump into Timemark 8 with barely any gear to its name. The most popular skill on this character is by far Frost Terror. However, I wanted to do something a little bit different, so today we're actually talking about the recently changed skill, Howling Gale. Before we get into the build proper, I'd just like to say thank you. With the recent season of Torchlight, there's been a big influx of new subscribers to the channel. I'm very appreciative of that. If you aren't subscribed, consider doing so. I have tons of content on Torchlight, as well as other ARPGs like Path of Exile, Last Epoch and Diablo 4, and every now and then dabble in other genres of games. So if that's something that you'd like, consider supporting the channel. Okay, on with the build, starting with the skilled portion. For reference, my current setup is hitting 30 billion peak damage on dummy, with around 10 billion sustained. You can check my character in the builder below, or in-game on EU Trade, on the hero ranking under the name Sandstorm. Our main skill, Howling Gale, requires some understanding to comprehend how to scale this build. Firstly, it's a pure physical spell that we will convert into cold. Secondly, it gains a massive boost to its damage per additional max channel stack. Also, the higher the stack, the quicker it moves and the bigger its AoE is. Finally, increases to your cast speed will also affect how quickly the skill will take on enemies inside its range. It is very important to understand the skill damage scales with the max increased channel stacks, not current channel stacks, meaning, as far as I can tell and throughout all my testing, if your Howling Gale is at 1 stack or at 10 stacks, it will do the same amount of damage. The Howling Gale that is at 10 stacks, however, is simply going to move faster and have a wider reach, but its damage will not be higher. With that said, for the supports on Howling Gale, we run Freeze Chance, Crit Damage, Overload, Cold Pan, and Guard. If you currently don't have Misfortune Watch, which we are using, and I'll talk about that in the gearing section, Spell Concentration is a good replacement for critical strike damage. Due to our boots, we want to run a defensive skill, and our choice will be Delayed Pain. Delayed Pain will grant us a massive boost to our injury buffer and give us very nice extra defensive layer. We link it to Armor Infusion and Iron Fortification for the extra defense. Our mobility skill will be Frigid Transmission, a short-range dash that resets every time something is frozen, which in this build will allow us to cover far bigger range when compared to something like Blink, and we use it linked to quick mobility and periodic bursts for the cast speed steroid. Our Empower skill will be Mana Boil for the spell damage boost, and we link it to the usual setup with Self-Sacrifice, Well-Fought Battle, and Mania. Finally, make usage of the Elemental Destruction Curse, linked to Terrain of Malice and Abysmal Hatred. For the auras, run Summon Thunder Spirit for the big chunk of cast speed that it will provide. If you have a candle with high sealed mana, you might be able to link it to Superpower for an even bigger effect. The remaining 3 auras, Energy Fortress, Frigid Domain, and Elemental Amplification, will all be linked to the same supports, Selfishness and Aura Amplification. Firstly, let's talk about our legendaries. We're in 4 in the current version of the build. Firstly, Cicada Shell, a very powerful chess piece that provides us with a big increase to our life and energy shield, as well as adding a lot of elemental damage to our spells at the cost of 50% of the damage taken by passing our energy shield. This means that although we mainly focus on ES, we still want to invest a bit into life to make sure we aren't falling over at all times. For that reason, when crafting gear, consider investing into max life until you feel comfortable. On my setup, I currently have 1.5k life, and that feels good enough as long as I'm paying attention and making sure I'm not standing on degen pools. I also opt to run a life regen crafted mod here, as otherwise I have no regen and can't recover from cheap damage, making us eventually die from 1000 cuts throughout the map. Our second legendary is the Light Hunter belt, a very popular option in ES focused builds, converting a portion of our max life into ES and granting us a lot of ES regen the lower it gets. For our necklace, we run the very powerful Misfortune Watch, granting us essentially permanent crits due to the fact that Howling Gale is a persistent skill, meaning it snapshots when cast, and due to the amulet we can guarantee that it will crit at all times, at the cost of getting unlucky damage. On top of that, this amulet also provides a large chunk of critical damage and is very good for our setup. For the final legendary, we run Guild Guard Boots, giving us a very high chance to get barrier on defensive skill usage, as well as granting us Trill Barrier and a Hardened Barrier, which grant us 20% additional elemental damage and 20% additional physical damage respectively. The rest of our gear will be rares. Optimally, all of these pieces should be ES based. Starting with our helmet, we want to get high energy shield and if possible elemental damage or intelligence. On the suffixes, look for cast speed, resistances if needed, crit damage, or aura effect. Our gloves will want to firstly look for a +1 spell skill level. After that, look for energy shield and resistance on the suffixes. If resistances aren't required, the only real thing of value here will be crit damage. Gloves do not provide a lot for us outside of the plus skill level, so use these as a way to fix most of your resistances if possible. On both rings, we will want the same: high energy shield, high intelligence, and if possible, on the prefixes, spell damage. For the suffixes, we want resistances, crit damage, and cast speed. If resistances are necessary, freeze duration can be nice outside of the other two offensive mods already mentioned. For the weapon, firstly we want to look for, as high as possible, max channeled stacks. After that, the same thing, but with spell levels. Those are the two main mods that will scale your damage, and these are your highest priority. For the remaining of the mods, we want intelligence, elemental damage, cast speed, and crit strike damage. That would be the ideal weapon, but that can be very hard to craft or cost you thousands of FE on the market, so focus on primarily max channel stacks and spell level, and after that try to get the remaining mods as high as possible, depending on your budget. For candles, the clear option will be max channel stacks on both, and if you are looking for two mod ones, Sealed Mana or Aura Effect are very good to get here. Any channel skill mods like cast speed or damage are also very strong. If you want to check out the full passive trees, look at Builder in the description, as I will only cover the major nodes in detail. For the passive trees we run, we firstly go with Goddess of Knowledge, after that Arcanist, and lastly Elementalist. On the Goddess of Knowledge tree, we start by going into Winter, granting us a lot of additional damage the higher an enemy's Frostbite is. The second node on this tree will be Insight, a very simple node that grants us additional spell damage at the cost of increasing spell cost, a trade we are more than happy to make. Our second tree will be Arcanist. We start by taking Frostbitten, granting us a boost to damage against frozen targets, as well as inflicting a lot of frostbite the first time we strike an enemy. Our second node on this tree will be Extreme Coolness, granting the enemy a lot of cold res reduction while they are frozen, significantly boosting our damage. Frozen Lotus can also be employed, though I would only recommend that if you are somehow struggling with mana costs, which realistically should never happen. Our final tree will be Elementalist. The first node will be Focus, an obvious choice that grants us 2 max channel stacks, as well as additional damage per every boost to max channel stacks that we get. On the second node, for once, All options here are competitive and are decently close to one another. With that said, my recommendation will be Quick Ritual, for its massive boost to our cast speed with channel skills, which, due to the way our skill functions, will boost the tick rate of our tornado to very high levels. On your slates, there are 3 things that you really want to aim to get on every single one. If possible, more than one per slate, but that can get very expensive, so start simple and upgrade as you go. Firstly, you want to get plus levels if you still haven't hit the soft cap of level 30 on Howling Gale. Next, focus blessings up to 8 to maximize our overload support. And finally, as many max channel stacks as you can possibly get. Other common mods that you can also look for are Energy Shield, Cast Speed, Aura Effect, and Sealed Mana. Finally, for our traits. At level 25 and 60, the traits are mandatory and grant us a lot of benefits against enemies who are frozen, as well as to our frostbite rate, on top of a lot of just general damage. Our level 45 option will be Snowy Embrace, for the plus 6 max cold energy. The first line, although meaningful while leveling, will not be relevant for the endgame setup we are talking. For the level 75 option, we go with Frigid Infusion, allowing us to keep stacking frostbite on the enemy even while they are frozen, making it easier to refreeze them and granting us a much higher uptime on freeze. For the level 90 option, Blooming Frost Flower can be employed for mapping for higher speeds. However, my recommendation will be Bone Piercing Frost. This will grant us a major amount of damage against frozen enemies and a little while after, making for a very strong single target boost. For your relic, you want to look at getting additional damage against frozen enemies, as well as additional damage and injury buffer effect. Both of them grant you a lot of damage, and you want to get them as high tier as possible. If purchasing a relic, look for ones with a second memory slot open at all times. That will be because we run Ice Surge Undercurrent, a memory that makes so the higher our cold energy, the higher additional damage our next main skill will do. This works very well with our setup due to the snapshotting nature of Howling Gale. Naturally, the remaining 2 memories will both be aiming at increasing our max cold energy, preferably with tier 1 rules. For the second mods, try to get either cold damage or damage against frozen enemies. And that will be everything for today's build. I hope you enjoy, and if you did, please take the time to subscribe, as that will help a lot to grow the channel further. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all later. Bye bye.